Dr. Elena Vasquez rubbed her tired eyes and stared at the screen again. The numbers had not changed in the past 3 hours. She had been working at the Deep Space Communication Array on Europa for 12 years, and she had never seen anything like this signal. The coffee in her cup had gone cold hours ago. Outside the thick windows of the research station, Europa's icy surface stretched endlessly under the pale light of Jupiter. The giant planet hung in the black sky like an orange and brown marble, its storms swirling in patterns that had fascinated humans for centuries. But Elena was not looking at Jupiter today. Her attention was fixed on the strange signal that her equipment had picked up 2 days ago. "Still working on that mystery signal?" asked Dr. James Park as he entered the communication room. James was Elena's second-in-command and had been her friend for 8 years. He carried 2 cups of fresh coffee and set one down next to Elena's keyboard. "This is not like anything we have seen before," Elena said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Look at these patterns. They repeat every 72 hours exactly. The mathematical structure is too complex to be natural, but it does not match any human transmission we have on record." James looked over her shoulder at the data scrolling across the screen. Waves of different frequencies created colorful lines that rose and fell in complex rhythms. "Could it be from one of the outer colonies? Maybe they are testing new equipment?" Elena shook her head. "I already checked with all the human settlements. Mars, Titan, the asteroid mining stations, even the research outpost at Pluto. Nobody is sending anything like this." She pulled up another screen that showed the signal's direction and strength. "And look at this. The signal is not aimed at Earth or any human colony. It is pointing toward a star system 40 light-years away." James frowned. "That makes no sense. Why would anyone send a signal to a star system that far away? Even if someone was there, it would take 40 years for the message to reach them." "That is what makes this so interesting," Elena said. She opened a new file on her computer. "I have been working on translating the mathematical patterns. They are not random. There is definitely a structure here like a language." For the next 3 weeks, Elena spent every waking hour studying the signal. She barely slept and forgot to eat most meals. James had to bring her food to make sure she did not collapse from exhaustion. The other scientists on the station began to worry about her health, but Elena could not stop working. Something about the signal called to her. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning. Elena had been staring at the same sequence of numbers for hours when suddenly the pattern became clear. The signal was not just one message. It was many messages layered on top of each other, like voices singing in harmony. "James," she called, out, her voice echoing through the empty corridors of the station. It was early morning, and most people were still sleeping. "James, come here right now." James stumbled into the communication room, still wearing his pajamas and rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What is it? Did something happen?" "I figured it out," Elena said, her hands shaking with excitement as she pointed to the screen. "This is not just a signal. It is a distress call. And it is not from humans." James was suddenly very awake. "What do you mean, not from humans?" Elena pulled up her translation work. Over the past 3 weeks, she had identified patterns that seemed to represent numbers, coordinates, and what looked like technical specifications. "The mathematics are different from ours, but I can understand them. Look here." She pointed to a series of patterns that repeated throughout the message. "These are coordinates in space. Not Earth coordinates, but some other system. And these numbers here? I think they represent population counts. Millions of individuals." James stared at the screen in disbelief. "Are you saying this is an alien signal?" "Not just any signal," Elena said. "It is a cry for help. They are calling for someone to come and rescue them." Over the next few days, Elena and James worked together to decode more of the message. They discovered that the aliens called themselves the Kethmori. Their home planet was in danger from something they described as a sky fire that would make their world impossible to live on. The signal contained detailed information about their population, their technology level, and their location. Most importantly, it contained a countdown. The Kethmori had less than 2 years before their planet would be destroyed. But the signal was not aimed at Earth. It was directed toward another star system, apparently calling for help from a different, alien species that the Kethmori called the Architects. "We need to report this to Earth immediately," James said after they had finished their basic translation. "This is the most important discovery in human history," Elena agreed, but something bothered her about the signal. She had noticed that it was getting weaker each day. "James, look at this. The signal strength is declining. I think their equipment is failing." They sent their findings to the United Earth Council on Earth. The message would take several hours to reach Earth, even using the fastest communication systems available. While they waited for a response, Elena continued to study the alien distress call. She discovered something that made her blood run cold. Hidden in the technical specifications was information about the Kethmori's attempts to contact the Architects. They had been sending their distress call for over a year, but there had been no response. "What if the Architects cannot help them?" Elena asked James. "What if they are too far away? Or what if something has happened to them?" James did not have an answer. They both knew that space was vast and dangerous. Civilizations could rise and fall without anyone knowing. The Kethmori might be completely alone. The response from Earth arrived 18 hours later. The United Earth Council was sending a team of experts to Europa to study the signal. They wanted Elena and James to continue their work and prepare a full report on everything they had discovered, but Elena could not focus on preparing reports. Every time she listened to the alien signal, she heard something that the translation computers could not capture. Underneath the technical data and population numbers, there was something else. Music. Voices singing in harmonies that no human throat could produce. She worked for days to isolate these musical elements from the rest of the signal. When she finally succeeded, what she heard broke her heart. They were lullabies. Parents singing to their children as their world began to die. The expert team from Earth arrived 3 days later. They confirmed Elena's translation and added their own analysis. The situation was worse than anyone had imagined. The Kethmori star was becoming unstable ahead of schedule. The aliens had months, not years, before their planet became uninhabitable. Dr. Sarah Chen, the mission leader from Earth, studied the data with growing concern. "Have we detected any response from these architects?" she asked. "Nothing," Elena replied. "The signal has been broadcasting for over a year and there has been no answer." Dr. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked the question that would change everything. What would happen if we answered instead? The United Earth Council chamber had never been so quiet. 200 representatives from every human colony and nation sat in stunned silence as Dr. Elena Vasquez finished playing the translated alien lullabies. The haunting melodies of dying parents singing to their children echoed through the great hall. President Maria Santos of the United Earth government looked around the chamber. Faces showed shock, wonder, and fear. This was the moment humanity had dreamed of for centuries. First contact with alien life. But it was not the joyful meeting they had imagined. It was a funeral song. "Dr. Vasquez," President Santos said, her voice careful and controlled, "please explain to the council exactly what you are proposing." Elena stood at the central podium, feeling very small under the dome of the council chamber. Above her head, a holographic display showed the Kethmori star system and the countdown that now showed less than 18 months remaining. "The facts are simple," Elena began. "The Kethmori have been calling for help for over a year. The species they call the Architects have not responded. We may be their only hope." Representative Johnson from the Mars colonies stood up. "Dr. Vasquez, our fastest ships take 35 years to travel 40 light years. Even if we left today, we would arrive decades too late." "That is correct with our current technology," said Commander Sarah Chen, who had been promoted to lead the potential rescue mission. "But we would not be using current technology." Sarah activated the holographic projector. The image above the council chamber changed to show technical drawings of a massive spacecraft, unlike anything humanity had ever built. "This is Project Lighthouse," Sarah explained. "We would strip resources from 3 asteroid mining operations and conscript every available ship in the solar system. We would build humanity's first-generation ship, a vessel capable of carrying 50,000 people and sustaining them for the journey." The council chamber erupted in voices. Representatives shouted questions and arguments across the floor. President Santos had to call for order 3 times before the noise died down. Representative Williams from the African Union was the first to speak. Commander Chen, what you are describing would bankrupt our economy. We would have to shut down half our colonial operations to build this ship. The cost would be enormous, Sarah agreed. We estimate it would require 80% of our industrial capacity for 2 years. Many Earth-based projects would have to stop completely. Representative Zhang from the Asian Coalition shook her head. And for what? To save aliens we have never met? Aliens who might not even want our help? We tried to contact them directly, Elena said. I have been sending messages to their system for weeks. But our signals will not reach them for 40 years. We cannot ask their permission. The debate continued for hours. Some representatives argued that humanity had a moral duty to help any species in danger. Others insisted that humans should focus on their own survival and expansion into space. Representative Davis from the American Federation stood up. I have to ask the hard question that everyone is thinking. Why should we risk our future for strangers? We have our own problems. Overpopulation on Earth, resource shortages in the outer colonies, political tensions between the settlements. Should we not solve these problems before we try to save aliens? A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. Many representatives nodded their heads. It was a reasonable question that demanded an honest answer. Elena looked around the chamber at the faces of humanity's leaders. She thought about the lullabies she had translated, about children's voices singing in a language no human had ever heard before. She thought about what it meant to be human. May I tell you what I think makes us human? Elena asked. The chamber grew quiet again. It is not our technology or our weapons or our colonies. It is the fact that when we hear someone crying for help, we cannot ignore it. She gestured to the holographic display showing the dying Kethmori world. 3 months ago, we were alone in the universe. Now we know we have neighbors. Our first neighbors are dying and they are crying for help. What kind of neighbors would we be if we ignored their cries? Representative Kim from the Korean Republic raised her hand. Dr. Vasquez, what if this is a trap? What if these aliens are dangerous? Then we will face that danger, said Commander Chen. But I would rather take that risk than live with the knowledge that we let an entire civilization die when we might have saved them. The debate continued through the night. Some representatives left the chamber, saying the whole idea was impossible. Others stayed to argue details about ship design, resource allocation, and crew selection. Dr. James Park, who had traveled from Europa with Elena, presented technical data about the proposed journey. The generation ship would need to achieve speeds never attempted by human vessels. The fusion drives would have to run beyond safe limits, possibly shortening the lifespan of everyone aboard. We are talking about 50,000 volunteers, James explained. People who would leave Earth and never return. People who would spend 35 years in space with no guarantee of success. Representative Thompson from the Canadian Territories asked, who would volunteer for such a mission? Who would leave their families forever to save aliens? Before anyone could answer, a message appeared on the chamber's communication screens. It was from the Global Volunteer Registry, a system that had been established centuries ago for dangerous space missions. The numbers on the screen showed volunteer applications from across the solar system. Military personnel, scientists, engineers, doctors, teachers, and civilians from every profession imaginable. In just 12 hours since news of the alien distress call had become public, over 2 million people had volunteered. The chamber fell silent again. 2 million humans were willing to leave everything behind to save strangers from another world. President Santos called for a recess to allow representatives to consult with their governments. When the session resumed 6 hours later, the mood in the chamber had changed. Representative Johnson from Mars, who had been one of the strongest opponents, stood up first. The Mars colonial government has voted to support Project Lighthouse. We will contribute our mining ships and industrial facilities. One by one, other representatives announced their support. The European Federation pledged their advanced fusion technology. The Pacific Alliance offered their best engineers. The African Union promised agricultural specialists for the long journey. When the final vote was called, President Santos looked around the chamber one last time. All in favor of authorizing Project Lighthouse and the mission to save the Kethmori. Hands rose across the chamber. Elena counted quickly in her head. It was close, very close. All opposed? More hands rose. Elena's heart sank as she realized the count might be even. President Santos asked for an official tally. The vote counters worked quickly, checking and double-checking their numbers. The entire chamber waited in tense silence. "The final count," announced the chief vote counter, "is 101 in favor, 99 opposed. The authorization for Project Lighthouse had passed by exactly 2 votes. Elena felt tears on her cheeks. Humanity was going to try to save the Kethmori. Against all odds, against all reason, against all financial sense, humans were going to risk everything to answer a cry for help that was never meant for them. The real work was just beginning. Captain Marcus Torres had commanded ships for 20 years, but he had never seen anything like the construction happening in Earth's orbit. The skeletal frame of the Horizon's Promise stretched across 5 kilometers of space, a patchwork giant built from every type of vessel humanity could spare. Military destroyers formed the ship's spine. Cargo haulers became living quarters. Research vessels were converted into laboratories and workshops. Tourist ships from the inner planet routes were transformed into hydroponic gardens and recreational areas. It looked like madness, but somehow it was working. "Status report," Marcus called out as he floated through the construction command center. The artificial gravity systems would not be installed for another 3 weeks. So everyone moved by pushing off walls and handholds. Engineer Lisa Rodriguez consulted her tablet while anchoring herself to a support beam. "We are actually ahead of schedule on the main structure. The fusion drive assembly is proving more challenging. We are pushing the technology beyond anything we have tested before." Marcus nodded grimly. The ship would need to achieve speeds that no human vessel had ever attempted. The fusion drives would run so hot that they might burn out halfway through the journey, but there was no choice. Every day of delay meant less time to save the Kethmori. "What about the life support systems?" Marcus asked. "Dr. Kim's team finished integrating the atmospheric processors yesterday," Lisa replied. "We can support 50,000 people for 40 years, assuming nothing major breaks down." That was a big assumption. The Horizon's Promise was built from hundreds of different ships with incompatible systems. Every day brought new problems as engineers tried to make old cargo ship computers talk to military navigation systems, or connect tourist ship kitchens to research vessel power grids. Marcus pushed himself toward the observation deck to look out at the work crews. Thousands of people in spacesuits swarmed over the ship's hull, welding, connecting, and testing every system. They worked 18-hour shifts, sleeping in temporary shelters attached to the construction frame. "Captain Torres to the communication center," came a voice over the ship's intercom. "Urgent message from Earth." Marcus pushed off from the observation window and glided through the corridor to the communications room. Dr. Elena Vasquez was there, looking worried as she stared at a screen full of data. "What is it?" Marcus asked. "We have been monitoring the Kethmori signal continuously," Elena explained. "The news is not good. Their star is becoming unstable faster than they predicted. They may have only 6 months instead of 18. Marcus felt his stomach drop. 6 months would not be enough time to finish the ship, let alone make the journey. "Are you certain?" Elena nodded sadly. "The pattern changes in their distress signal are clear. Their situation is getting desperate very quickly." "Can we launch earlier?" Marcus asked. "Not without risking everyone aboard," said Chief Engineer Rodriguez, who had joined them in the communications room. "We need at least 4 more months to finish the critical systems. If we launch too early, the ship could break apart during acceleration." Marcus stared out the window at the construction work continuing around them. 50,000 people had volunteered to leave Earth forever on a ship that might not even hold together. Now they were being told they might already be too late. "What about the automated probes?" he asked. "Are they sending back any useful data?" Elena pulled up another screen. 3 months ago, Earth had launched a series of fast probes toward the Kethmori system. They could not carry people, but they could reach the alien world years before the Horizon's Promise. "The first probe should arrive in the Kethmori system in about 3 months," Elena said. "We will finally get real-time information about what is happening there." Over the following weeks, work on the ship continued at a frantic pace. The crew was exhausted, but nobody complained. They all knew what was at stake. Messages arrived daily from the other human colonies, offering supplies, equipment, and encouragement. The volunteers began arriving from across the solar system. They came from every human settlement: farmers from Mars, miners from the asteroid belt, scientists from the moons of Jupiter, teachers from the cloud cities of Venus. Each person brought only what they could carry, knowing they would never see their homes again. Marcus tried to meet with as many volunteers as possible. He wanted to understand what motivated people to make such a sacrifice for strangers. The answer surprised him. "My daughter asked me what I would want aliens to do if Earth was dying," said Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a medical officer from the lunar colonies. "I could not tell her I would want them to ignore us. This is the most important thing humans have ever tried to do," said engineer Roberto Santos from the Mars mining operations. "If we succeed, we will not just save the Kethmori. We will prove that intelligence in the universe can choose cooperation over survival. I listen to their lullabies every night," said teacher Mary Johnson from the Europa Research Station. "Those are parents singing to their children just like human parents do. How can we let those voices go silent?" Not everyone supported the mission. Protests had broken out on Earth and several colonies. Critics argued that the resources being spent on Project Lighthouse could solve hunger, disease, and poverty in human space. They called the mission alien worship and suicide for strangers. Some of the criticism was valid. The massive resource allocation for the ship had caused shortages throughout the solar system. Food prices had doubled on Mars. Several planned colonial expansions had been canceled. People were suffering real hardships so that strangers might be saved. Marcus understood the criticism, but he also understood something else. The volunteers kept coming. Despite the protests, despite the economic hardship, despite the near-certain possibility that they would die in space without ever seeing home again, humans continued to volunteer. 3 months into construction, the first automated probe reached the Kethmori system. The data it sent back changed everything. Elena's voice was shaking when she called Marcus to the communications center. "Captain, you need to see this immediately." The probe's cameras had captured images of the Kethmori homeworld. It was a beautiful planet with blue oceans and green continents. Not so different from Earth, but something was terribly wrong. "Look at these readings," Elena said, pointing to the data streams from the probe. "There are ships around the planet, but they are not Kethmori ships." Marcus studied the images. Sleek dark vessels surrounded the dying world. They were clearly artificial, but their design was unlike anything in the probe's databases. "Could these be the architects?" Marcus asked. "Maybe they finally responded to the distress call." Elena shook her head. "I do not think so. Look at what they are doing." The probe's instruments detected energy beams lancing down from the dark ships to the planet's surface. Cities were burning. The probe's radiation detectors showed massive destruction across multiple continents. "This is not a rescue operation," Elena whispered. "This is an attack." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. The Kethmori were not just facing a natural disaster. They were under assault by some unknown enemy. The distress signal had not just been a call for evacuation. It had been a cry for help in the face of genocide. "How long until we can launch?" Marcus asked. Engineer Rodriguez, who had been monitoring the conversation, checked her schedule. 4 months minimum, Captain. We cannot compress the timeline any further without risking total system failure." Marcus looked at the images of the burning Kethmori world.
4 months might be too late.
But it was all the time they had. "Then we launch in 4 months," he said, "and we go in ready for a fight." The horizon's promise shuddered as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Captain Marcus Torres gripped his command chair as the massive ship groaned under the stress of sudden deceleration. After 35 years of travel, they had finally arrived at the Kethmori system. "Status report," Marcus called out. His voice was hoarse with age. He was now 73 years old, gray-haired and lined with decades of worry. Most of the original crew had aged similarly during the long journey through space. "Fusion drives are stable," reported engineer Lisa Rodriguez from her station. She was now the chief engineer, having taken over when her predecessor died of cancer 12 years into the journey. "All major systems are operational, but we are showing stress fractures throughout the hull." Marcus nodded. The ship had held together for the journey, but just barely. They had lost 3,000 people during the trip to various accidents, illnesses, and equipment failures. The survivors were tired, older, and mourning their lost friends. "But they were here." "Dr. Vasquez, what are we looking at?" Marcus asked. Elena, now 58 and serving as the ship's head of communications, studied her instruments with grim concentration. "The Kethmori homeworld is still intact, but barely. The surface temperature has risen by 40 degrees. Most of the oceans have evaporated." She paused, checking another screen. "Captain, there are still life signs on the planet. Millions of them. The Kethmori are still alive. A cheer went up from the bridge crew. After 35 years of travel, they had arrived in time to save at least some of the dying species. But Elena's expression remained troubled. There is something else. I am detecting unknown ships in orbit around the planet, the same type of vessels our probes identified decades ago. Marcus felt his heart sink. The attackers are still here? Yes, and there are more of them now. I count at least 50 vessels of unknown design maintaining a blockade around the planet. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Park, Elena's daughter who had been born during the journey, looked up from her tactical station. Captain, I'm getting some very strange energy readings from those ships. They do not match any known technology. Marcus activated the ship's main viewer. The screen showed the Kethmori system spread out before them. The dying star glowed an angry red-orange, much brighter and more unstable than it had been when they left Earth. The homeworld was a brown and gray marble, its once blue oceans now mostly gone. Surrounding the planet was a fleet of sleek, dark ships that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved in patterns that made no sense, sometimes passing through each other as if they were not entirely solid. Dr. Vasquez, are you receiving any communications from those ships? Marcus asked. Elena worked at her console for several minutes before responding. Nothing that I can understand, Captain. They are transmitting something, but it is not electromagnetic radiation. It is something else entirely. What about from the planet? Can we contact the Kethmori directly? I am trying, but something is interfering with our communications. Every time I try to send a message to the surface, it gets absorbed by something in space around the planet. Marcus studied the tactical display. The unknown ships outnumbered the Horizon's promise by 50 to 1. The human ship had some weapons, military, lasers and missile systems salvaged from Earth's defense fleet, but they had never been tested against alien technology. Captain, interrupted Dr. Michael Chen, the ship's head of xenobiology. I think I know what we are dealing with. Marcus turned to the scientist. Explain. During the journey, I have been studying all the data our probe sent back. I believe these are not conventional ships at all. They appear to be some kind of energy-based life forms. The bridge fell silent. Energy-based aliens had been theorized by Earth scientists for centuries, but no one had ever encountered them. They seemed to feed on something, Dr. Chen continued. Our long-range sensors detected similar energy patterns around the ruins of several other star systems. I think these beings consume the life force of entire civilizations. Are you saying they eat planets? Asked Sarah Park. Not the planets themselves, but everything alive on them. They appear to be drawn to worlds with large populations. They blockade the planet, prevent any escape, and then slowly drain the life energy from all the inhabitants. Marcus felt sick. How long does the process take? Based on our observations, several decades for a world the size of the Kethmori homeworld. They feed slowly, keeping the population alive but weakened. It appears they want to maximize the amount of life energy they can harvest. Elena looked up from her communication station. Captain, I am receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It is very weak, but I think I can clean it up. She worked for several minutes filtering and amplifying the signal. Finally, a voice came through the bridge speakers. It was clearly alien. The vocal patterns were unlike anything a human throat could produce. But Elena's translation software had learned to understand Kethmori, language from decades of studying their distress. Calls. This is Kethmori Survival Center 7. We detect a new ship in our system. Please identify yourself. Are you the architects? Have you finally come to help us? The voice was weak and filled with desperate hope. Marcus felt tears in his eyes as he realized how long the Kethmori had been waiting for rescue. Elena activated the communication system. This is Dr. Elena Vasquez of the Earthship Horizon's Promise. We are not the architects, but we received your distress call. We have come to help you. There was a long pause. Then the alien voice returned, now filled with confusion. Earthship? We do not understand. We did not send our call to Earth. How did you receive our message? Your signal was not aimed at our world, Elena explained. But we heard it anyway. We have traveled for 35 years to reach you. Another pause. When the Kethmori spoke again, their voice was broken with emotion. You came to help us? Even though we did not ask you for help? Yes, Elena said simply. We came because you needed help. Marcus stepped forward. This is Captain Torres, commander of this vessel. We have 50,000 humans aboard. We came to evacuate your people. How many survivors are there? Approximately 3 million on the surface, the Kethmori replied. But the shadow ships prevent any escape. Many have tried to leave the planet. None have succeeded. The shadow feeders destroy any ship that tries to break the blockade. Marcus studied the tactical display again. 3 million aliens needed evacuation. But the energy beings, the shadow feeders, controlled all the space around the planet. Dr. Chen, Marcus said, is there any way to fight these energy beings? The scientist consulted his notes. Possibly. Energy beings should be vulnerable to certain electromagnetic frequencies. If we could disrupt their cohesion, they might become vulnerable to conventional weapons. What kind of electromagnetic pulse would we need? Dr. Chen did calculations on his tablet.
Something incredibly powerful.
More than our ship's defensive systems could generate. He paused, checking his numbers again. We would need to use the main reactor itself as an electromagnetic pulse generator. Engineer Rodriguez looked up sharply. Doctor, that would destroy our power core. We would lose all main systems, including life support. And propulsion, added Sarah Park. We would be stranded here. Marcus looked around the bridge at his crew. These people had already sacrificed everything to come here. Now they were being asked to sacrifice their lives as well. There has to be another way, said Elena. Marcus studied the tactical display for a long time. 50 energy beings surrounded the planet. 3 million Kethmori were trapped on the surface, slowly dying as their life force was drained away. The only way to save them was to destroy the ship that had brought them here. How long would the electromagnetic pulse disable the shadow feeders? He asked. Unknown, Dr. Chen admitted. Possibly minutes, possibly hours. Long enough to evacuate some of the Kethmori population, but probably not all of them. Marcus made his decision. Then we save who we can. Captain Marcus Torres stood before the assembled crew of the Horizon's Promise. 5,000 people filled the ship's main assembly hall, representing the survivors of the 35-year journey. The rest of the crew monitored critical systems throughout the ship or prepared the evacuation shuttles. You all know why we are here, Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall's communication system. The Kethmori are dying, and we are their only hope for survival. But saving them will require the ultimate sacrifice. He gestured to the technical display behind him, showing the ship's reactor configuration. We must use our main power core as a weapon against the energy beings. This will destroy our ship and strand us in this system. Many of us will not survive. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but no one seemed surprised. They had all understood the risks when they volunteered decades ago. I want everyone to understand clearly, Marcus continued. This is not an order. Anyone who wishes to remain on the ship and try to survive can do so. The shuttles can only carry a fraction of our people anyway. A voice called out from the crowd. Captain, how many Kethmori can we save? Dr. Elena Vasquez stepped forward to answer. Our shuttles and emergency pods can carry approximately 500,000 beings. The Kethmori are smaller than humans, so we can fit more of them in each vessel. Another voice. What about the rest? What happens to the other 2.5 million? Elena's voice was heavy with sorrow. We cannot save them all. We can only save who we can. The hall fell silent. Marcus looked out at the faces of his crew, people who had left Earth as young adults and were now middle-aged or elderly. People who had raised children aboard this ship, children who had never seen a planet, people who had already given up everything for strangers. The question before us is simple, Marcus said. Do we try to save 500,000 alien lives knowing it will cost us our own? Or do we try to find another way, knowing that every day we delay means more Kethmori die? Engineer Lisa Rodriguez stood up in the crowd. Captain, I have a question about the electromagnetic pulse. Dr. Chen says it might disable the shadow feeders for minutes or hours. What if it only works for minutes? What if we destroy our ship and still cannot save anyone? Dr. Chen took the podium. Engineer Rodriguez asks the right question. We are operating on theory and hope. The electromagnetic pulse might work or it might not. The shadow feeders might be disabled for long enough to evacuate 500,000 Kethmori, or they might recover too quickly for us to save anyone. So we might die for nothing? Asked someone from the back of the hall. Yes, Dr. Chen said simply. We might die for nothing. The hall was quiet again. Marcus had expected fear, arguments, maybe even mutiny. Instead, he saw something else in the faces of his crew. Determination Dr. Jennifer Walsh, now the ship's chief medical officer, stood up. "Captain, I have been listening to the Keth-Mori communications from the planet. They are dying slowly and in great pain as their life energy is drained away. Even if we only save a few thousand of them, we will have ended that suffering for those few thousand. That seems worth the risk to me." Teacher Mary Johnson, now responsible for educating the ship's second generation, nodded in agreement. "My students were born on this ship. They have never seen Earth or any planet. If we succeed, they will get to see the Keth-Mori homeworld before they die. If we fail, at least they will die knowing their parents tried to do something important." One by one, crew members stood up to speak. Veterans of the journey, people who had maintained the ship's systems for decades, parents who wanted to leave a better universe for their children. "We did not come this far to turn back now," said Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez. "The shadow feeders will just move on to another world after they finish with the Keth-Mori," said Lieutenant Commander. "Of course, maybe if we hurt them here, they will think twice about attacking other civilizations." "We came here to answer a call for help," said Dr. Vasquez. "That call is still sounding. We should answer it." Marcus called for a formal vote. "All in favor of proceeding with the electromagnetic pulse attack, knowing the risks to our own lives?" Hands rose throughout the hall. Marcus counted quickly. It was overwhelming. More than 90% of the crew supported the attack. All opposed? Only a handful of hands rose. The decision was clear. Over the next 6 hours, the crew prepared for battle. The shuttles and escape pods were loaded with supplies and configured to carry as many Keth-Mori as possible. Engineering teams worked to modify the main reactor for use as a weapon. Medical teams prepared emergency treatment areas for both human and alien survivors. Marcus spent the final hour before the attack in the communication center, listening to Elena talk with the Keth-Mori on the planet's surface. "We understand the risk you are taking for us," the alien voice said through Elena's translation system. "We do not know how to thank you." "You do not need to thank us," Elena replied. "We are doing what anyone should do when they hear someone calling for help. Our children sing songs about the sky people who will come to save us," the Keth-Mori said. "We never thought the sky people would be real." Elena wiped tears from her eyes. "We are real, and we are coming." The attack began at 800 ship time. The Horizon's Promise moved toward the planet at maximum speed, drawing the attention of the shadow feeders. The energy beings swarmed toward the human ship like angry wasps. "Electromagnetic pulse in 30 seconds, announced Dr. Chen from the engineering station. "All shuttles prepare for immediate launch," Marcus ordered. 20 seconds. Marcus looked around the bridge one last time. These people had become his family during the long journey. In a few moments, many of them would be dead. 10 seconds. "It has been an honor serving with all of you," Marcus said. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pulse activated. The Horizon's Promise's reactor core overloaded in a controlled explosion that sent electromagnetic energy radiating out in all directions. The effect on the shadow feeders was immediate and dramatic. The dark ships suddenly became visible as their energy fields collapsed. They writhed in space like creatures in pain, their formations breaking apart. "Shuttles launch now," Marcus shouted. Every small craft on the Horizon's Promise launched simultaneously, racing toward the planet's surface. The ship's lights flickered and died as the main power failed. Emergency lighting cast everything in a red glow. For 47 minutes, the shuttles worked frantically to evacuate Keth-Mori from the dying planet. The shadow feeders remained disabled, floating helplessly in space. Human pilots worked with Keth-Mori ground crews to load as many survivors as possible. Then the electromagnetic pulse effects began to fade. The shadow feeders started to reform, their dark energy field stabilizing, but something had changed. "Captain," Elena called out from her emergency power station, "we are receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. Dozens of different species are asking what happened here." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. The electromagnetic pulse was so powerful it could be detected from hundreds of light years away. Other civilizations want to know what created such a massive energy signature. More importantly, the shadow feeders seemed confused and frightened. For the first time in perhaps centuries, they had been hurt. Several of them retreated to the outer edge of the star system, maintaining distance from the crippled human ship. Over the following days, The survivors worked to establish a temporary colony on one of the Kethmori system's outer moons. They had saved 547,000 Kethmori lives, and not all of them, but more than half. The shadow feeders continued to circle the dying homeworld, but they no longer attacked evacuation ships. More remarkably, other species began arriving in the system. Elena's communications equipment, running on emergency power, detected ships from a dozen different civilizations approaching the Kethmori system. "They want to know how we hurt the shadow feeders," Elena explained to Marcus as they watched the alien ships arrive. "No one has ever successfully fought them before. The first ship to reach them belonged to a species called the Zephyrians. Their captain, speaking through a translation device, explained that the shadow feeders had destroyed 3 of their worlds over the past century. "You have given us hope," the Zephyrian captain said. "For the first time we know the feeders can be defeated. More species arrive daily. The Altair Collective, the Centauri Republic, the Vegan Trade Alliance, civilizations that had been hiding from the shadow feeders for generations. They brought supplies, technology, and most importantly, they brought purpose. They want to form an alliance," Elena told Marcus 1 month after the battle. "A coalition of species dedicated to fighting the shadow feeders and protecting developing civilizations." Marcus, now confined to a medical bed due to radiation exposure from the reactor explosion, smiled weakly. "And they want humans to lead it? They say we are the only species crazy enough to sacrifice everything for strangers. They think that makes us ideal coordinators." Marcus laughed, which turned into a coughing fit. Dr. Walsh had told him he had perhaps 6 months to live. The radiation exposure from the destroyed reactor was slowly killing most of the original crew. "Elena," he said when he could speak again, "show me the star charts." Elena activated a portable display showing the local region of the galaxy.